Hey folks, it is officially fall, and our farmer friends at Sunset Lake Seder are busy in the fields in full harvest mode right now. They are literally out there cutting and hanging fresh hemp flower in their drying rooms, getting the new crop ready for release later this year. And while they're busy doing all the hard work, you get to reap the rewards. From now until the 28th, you can grab any of their smokable hemp products for 40% off with the code FLOWERPOWER25, one word. That's 40% FLOWERPOWER25. Whether you're trying to relax with the high, or you want to cut back on tobacco, or maybe just, stretch out the sash a little further for what Sam calls the entourage effect we discovered the other day. They have got the goods. I have multiple Sunset Lake Seder products right here on my desk, including the Relax gummies that I occasionally pop right before my walk home.
I got the Delta 9 gummies.
Oh, you got the Delta 9 gummies right in your hand.
Need a little jolt.
I have the lotion that I really typically rely on in the winter. And last night, I forgot to have my Sunset Lake Goodnight gummies before brushing my teeth, so I had them after, had to brush again, but still tasted good.
I shotgunned a tea alone
Whoa.
before the Packers game.
Go crazy. But it really is good stuff. I mean, they use regenerative farming practices, integrated pest management. They have great practices in terms of paying their workers a living wage, $22 minimum wage, I believe. They have worked with us on fundraising and independently fundraise for refugee resettlement, strike funds, and more. SunsetLakeSebede.com is where you can go to get their products and get up to 40% off of any smokable hemp products with the code FLOWERPOWER25. Head over to SunsetLakeSebede.com and use the code FLOWERPOWER25 to save 40% off on all their sun-grown flower, pre-rolls, and even vapor cartridges. This sale ends September 28th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. See their site for terms and conditions. And now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, an Australian ER doctor who just finished 2 missions in Gaza and is now working to get a children's hospital built. He'll be with us in studio. And later in the show, Jennifer Welch of the I've Had It podcast joins us to make fun of some right-wingers, of course. Also on the program, ABC announces they're bringing Jimmy Kimmel's show back after overwhelming backlash from Hollywood and basically anyone that cares about free speech. And FCC Chair Carr is now claiming that his "we can do this the easy way or the hard way" comments about Kimmel weren't meant as a threat. How silly of us to interpret it as such. But Sinclair, which operates dozens of ABC affiliates, will not air the show. And Nexstar, the conglomerate desperate for Trump to approve their merger, is still silent. Trump used his platform yesterday to baselessly link Tylenol use during pregnancy to autism. More on that in a second. Meanwhile, the Defense Department shelves its planned cleanup of forever chemicals at over 100 military sites. More cancer for our veterans in the surrounding areas. Is that a central Make America Great Again promise? Democrats launch a probe into Tom Homan for taking, allegedly, a $50,000 cash bribe from an undercover FBI agent. Trump's executive order declaring Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization appears to be totally unenforceable, but it keeps him busy. Signing things, that's what I like to do.
I think Joy Behar's Antifa.
I said it to be so.
Antifa Joy.
Trump cancels a meeting. You miss an opportunity. He would have picked Whoopi because she's a black woman.
Right.
Duh. Trump cancels a meeting with the Democrats over the looming government shutdown. Schumer's gonna demand a meeting even harder now. Silicon Valley starts to grumble about Trump's immigration crackdown, particularly on the H-1B visas.
Oh, so it starts affecting them.
Yeah.
It's fine when, restaurant workers are getting thrown into who knows where.
Right.
Well, maybe they want their maids still.
That's true. Macron announces that France is officially recognizing Palestinian statehood, but Israeli tanks press on and on into northern Gaza. Trump plans to meet with Arab leaders at the UN today, where he gave his typical unifying speech declaring that other member countries are, let me check my notes, going to hell. And lastly, Elon Musk's father is accused of sexually assaulting multiple of his children. Not shocked. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an M-Majority Report Tuesday. Whoa, shocker, I know. Sam is out today for Rosh Hashanah. Happy holidays to the Seder clan. Hello to Matt. Hello to Brian. And we will have Dr. Mohammed Mustafa with us in just a bit in studio. So that's the perk of Sam being out. He gets to sit in the big chair.
There's a power vacuum that's going to be filled.
Exactly. Looking forward to chatting and having the treat to have an in-person guest today. And then, of course, Jennifer Welch. Been a long time coming having her on the show.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. So, as I mentioned, yesterday, Trump and RFK Jr. held a press conference where they linked Tylenol to autism. Because RFK Jr. had a hard deadline from Trump. Harder than the deadlines Trump imposes on himself for things like tariffs. All of those are very...
2 weeks to 2 months.
They're semi-hard to soft deadlines. And, but Bobby had to deliver for him here. He apparently found the cure for autism in less than a year with his work as HHS secretary. And I find it interesting that they are kind of naming the brand specifically and not the active ingredient. I mean, they're doing both, but Trump is... This is not what a lawyer would advise.
It's literally because he can't pronounce acetaminophen.
Okay,
That's why he's saying it.
And there's a video of him trying to pronounce acetaminophen, but we'll play it now because I was not sure if I wanted to play this if I couldn't stick the landing of pronouncing it myself. But thanks, Brian, for dipping his toe in first. This is Trump yesterday at the press conference speaking about this.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of well, let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy, can be associated with a very increased risk of autism.
Oh, wow.
What was his mother taking?
Very increased risk.
Sounds very scientific, sir.
His mother's like, I just kept it to 1 bottle of wine a day, okay? Exactly. And he turned out great. That's a spurious allegation. I was just joking around. It's just a joke. We have no proof of that being the case. Anyway, that was an insane moment. I feel like the science just washed over me listening to that beautiful mind speak. Here he is with more evidence as to why this is the case, citing Cuba as an example of a place. He both cited Amish people and Cuba as places that don't, or as a
Amish
country.
people don't get ADHD, and,
And-
Cubans don't get autism. Yeah.
According to him. Also, could be factors, by the way, in that Amish claim, in that there's a more enclosed kind of gene pool, the fact that there's maybe less variance, but also, dude, they have lower reporting of cases of autism because they don't engage with modern science and medicine in the same way.
Pretty weird.
It's the same way he viewed COVID. It's like if Amish people don't report autism, it doesn't exist. Here he is now talking about how Cuba doesn't have autism, apparently.
This country is going through what parts of the world are going through. And I will say there are parts of the world that don't take Tylenol. I mean, there's a rumor, and I don't know if it's so or not, that Cuba...
Can I stop you there, Mr. President?
Rumor?
There's a rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not. Why is this being brought up?
I mean, the lack of responsibility with using the bully pulpit like this to speak about medicine, it's just so irresponsible. And we'll get to how they actually kind of know that they're being dishonest. Their own paper on this has a little paragraph that shows that they're being untruthful. But, I mean, let's let him riff on important public health information.
I heard.
Well, he sets it up. We don't have this in the beginning. He goes, Bobby wants to be careful about his words, but I won't. That's literally what he said.
That's a
This
promise.
country is going through what parts of the world are going through. And I will say there are parts of the world that don't take Tylenol. I mean, there's a rumor, and I don't know if it's so or not, that Cuba, they don't have Tylenol because they don't have the money for Tylenol, and they have virtually no autism, okay? Tell me about that one. And there are other parts of
should
the
tell us
world
about
where
it.
they don't have Tylenol, where they don't have autism. That tells you a lot.
Cuba has an autism rate of 83.3 per 10,000 children in 2023. According to data from the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network, the U.S. rate was 80.90, the same data shows. So that's more than the United States. Secondly,
They'd have a lot more.
they don't have the brand name Tylenol. Why might that be? Could it be
They don't have the money for it. They can't afford it.
that the Republicans, and that was one of the better things Obama did too, was trying to normalize relations with Cuba, and Biden scrapped that, and Trump has been even more hawkish.
We have a half-centuries-long collective punishment policy toward Cubans, basically restricting all sorts of products on them because we don't like that they overthrew a sort of a slave society.
And they didn't like that, capitalists couldn't get a piece of the pie, whether it be drilling in Cuba or their natural resources.
Or their casinos that they had in Cuba before, under the Batista regime.
So that's why they don't have Tylenol, not because they're too poor. In fact, they may be, poorer than the United States because of the embargo we're talking about, but their healthcare outcomes lap ours. Their life expectancy, their educational outcomes, better than the United States. Now, obviously, we have to treat these kinds of statements with a bit of care, unlike the administration, because we're talking about medical information here. So acetaminophen, all right, I'd said it, which is the active ingredient in Tylenol that he's referring to, is an essential medicine that prevents fevers. And in pregnant people, high fevers can pose a risk to the fetus. And Tylenol is important because ibuprofen, another option for, say, pain relief and fever reduction, that's Advil, that's Motrin, that's not safe for people who are pregnant. Tylenol is considered a safer option in that way. And this was backed
not
up.
in Cuba.
This was backed up by this large study by the Swedish University and Drexel, where they looked at 2 million children in Sweden, and they took the genetics and they took family environment into account, and they found no link between acetaminophen exposure and increased risk of autism. But there is that study that Sam did talk about, I believe, or at least the litigation surrounding some of this, where they were not successful yesterday. But here is Dr. Ann Bauer, the co-author of the study that they keep citing here. The study that looked at the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy. Speaking to CBS, there was some quote in another publication where she said she was sick to her stomach that her paper was being used in this way. And this is her, the doctor, explaining what the findings actually said.
We begin tonight at the White House, where President Donald Trump held a press conference focused on autism. During his remarks, he suggested a possible link between the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy and an increased risk of autism in children. Today, I spoke with the co-author of a study published last month in the journal Environmental Health. Now, the research linked prenatal use of acetaminophen to an increased incidence of disorders from autism and ADHD. But today, Dr. Ann Bauer stressed to me that the link she found requires a lot more research.
The risks that we identified were modest, particularly for short-term use. When we see the highest risk is for people who use it for an extended period of time. So I don't think that mothers should get hysterical if they're pregnant and have used it for a day or here or there. But they should not be using it as the first line of defense of any minor discomfort that they experience. They should be trying to use non-pharmaceutical interventions first. But it has its time and its place. While we strongly support precaution and warning pregnant women about the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy for things like nuisance pain and mild discomfort, acetaminophen is really one of the only tools we have for pregnant women. They are not allowed to use ibuprofen or aspirin during pregnancy. And things like high fever and extreme pain can cause severe outcomes and harm fetal development. Now, there should be a discussion between a woman and her physician before she takes it. But I think doctors are afraid to have even mentioned this in the past because they don't want to lose this tool in their toolbox. And it's a very nuanced statement that sometimes you still will need to use this medication.
All right. So there is the nuance that is necessary.
Allow me to enter this conversation.
But I will make a bunch of allegations without evidence. So she's in favor, in summary, I guess, of the White House kind of putting something on the Tylenol label, just basically saying, use this drug judiciously. Don't use it all the time, maybe to mitigate risk. And we still don't know if that would be the case, right? But if for discomfort reasons. If you have a fever, this needs to still be a tool in the toolbox to prevent the worst outcomes of, say, high fever in children. And so this is inconclusive at best. But this is the guy.
It's precautionary.
Yes.
This is pretty common in medicine, as far as I'm not a doctor. And we'll have a doctor on soon. But this is how they sort of talk. And she didn't say there has been, and I'm not sure, I haven't read the paper, but at least it doesn't establish, as far as I'm aware, a causal relationship with ADHD and autism with Tylenol.
No, but the FDA admits, by the way, this is Steve Inskeep from NPR, went to the bottom of the FDA statement on this, where they signal parents to avoid acetaminophen, except sometimes, and then it says, let's open the... Here it is. It might be the next slide. It's important to note that while an association between acetaminophen and neurological conditions has been described in many studies, a causal relationship has not been established. And there are contrary studies in the scientific literature. It is also noted that acetaminophen is the only over-the-counter drug approved for use to treat fevers during pregnancy, and high fevers in pregnant women can pose a risk to their children. Additionally, aspirin and ibuprofen have well-documented adverse impacts on the fetus. They have to cover their ass legally at the bottom paragraph of their statement on this. But everything prior to that is to appease Donald Trump who has embraced this fixation on autism that RFK Jr. has employed, where it's mostly about pathologizing children and giving parents this false sense of control and even hierarchy if they can compare their healthy kids to, God forbid, somebody with autism down the street. I made the right choices. I'm empowered in the exact right way.
See, not even pathologizing children. Doesn't it seem like it's pathologizing mothers?
Yes.
Where Kennedy and Trump get together and say the problem is you're taking too much pain relief.
The problem that we have in this country with healthcare is related to the fact it is because we do not guarantee it, and we do not have universal healthcare like essentially every other Western industrialized nation. And what this libertarian healthcare approach is about, which is one, treating people with autism or with disabilities as freaks
never pay taxes,
who can't participate in society, and almost as a pathogen that needs to be outrooted, as opposed to autism being a spectrum, and many folks on the autism spectrum contributing greatly to our society, despite what RFK would say.
They'll never pay $1 in taxes.
And lastly, it's about making it so that you feel empowered over your health care individually, but without there being any concept of public health or communality to it, or community.
Right, because just one quick note is that doctor said what should happen is the patient should have a conversation or relationship with their doctor where they talk about those things.
Exactly.
Do we finance that in this country? No.
No. But the brainworm told RFK, so we have to all comply now.
Glad that's sorted.
In a moment, we will be talking to Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, but first, a word from a few of our sponsors. Delete Me is a product that I started using before I even joined the Majority Report, let alone before knowing that they were a sponsor of our show. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time where surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. It's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. Having your address, phone number, and family members' names hanging out on the internet can have actual consequences in the real world and make everyone vulnerable. Especially in my case, if you're talking about things online, you can be a little inflammatory, you can piss some people off, you might get some harassment. I've been able to really limit that because of Delete Me. Things still, my family members have got to get it too, honestly, because it protects people beyond myself as well, honestly, Delete Me. But if you want that extra protection, Delete Me is the way to go for everybody. More and more online partisans and nefarious actors will find this data and use it to target political rivals, civil servants, and even outspoken critics, citizens posting their opinions online. With Delete Me, you can protect your personal privacy or the privacy of your business from doxing attacks before sensitive information can be exploited. The New York Times Wirecutter has named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring the Majority Report. What's cool is Delete Me, it sends you reports about what it's scraping from the internet, so you know it's working, and it's continuous. So it's just catching a lot of this stuff that can leave you vulnerable. And it's an essential for me. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/majority and use promo code majority at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/majority and enter code majority at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/majority, code majority. Link down below in the YouTube and episode descriptions and at majority.fm. If you like deep, thoughtful, progressive analysis, which of course Majority Report listeners do, you will love the print and digital edition of Current Affairs magazine. Current Affairs combines intelligent commentary, biting political satire, and gorgeous artwork to produce one of the country's most elegant and informative magazines, and it is all ad-free. Current Affairs is a fantastic complement to the Majority Report's work, delivering hard-hitting, totally independent, and entertaining coverage of the most important political, social, and economic issues of our time. Said this before, love Nathan Robinson, love the work that they do over there, and all of the other journalists at Current Affairs. I find myself, because we read the packet every day, you get the basics about the news. I find myself more drawn to magazine pieces because you do these deep dives, and no one does it better than Current Affairs. Use code Majority Report, one word, for 30% off for a year on any subscription of your choice. Go to currentaffairs.org/subscribe and enter code Majority Report at checkout. Again, that's currentaffairs.org/subscribe and enter the code Majority Report at checkout for 30% off on any subscription of your choice. The offer expires October 31st. Thanks to Current Affairs for partnering with us on that. And now we don't even need to take a little break because we have our guest in studio, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, Australian ER doctor who completed 2 medical missions in Gaza and is now working to get a children's hospital built in the region. Dr. Mo, as you're often called, thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you for having me, man. I'm a big fan, so it's a bit surreal being in here.
Oh, yeah? What's your impression? I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, but you were saying how different
Yeah, like I thought this was going to be like a big studio project, and do you know what I mean?
Well, don't say where we are.
No, I won't say where you are,
Okay.
but let's just say I was surprised. But hey, listen, man, it's made me even more impressed.
Oh,
with how you get things done. So fair play to you.
And you did Piers Morgan's show, a little bit of a different setup, huh?
Yeah. There's a lot of money behind that show.
They when I did it, they sent me like a van where it's all lit up and it's all rigged and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like a satellite van. That's how I did it. But you did the studio in London.
Yeah,
I guess.
I went in, and sat next to Piers. Look, it was I think it's important, with somebody like that when you're talking to somebody on a screen, it's very easy just to to not see them as an individual. But I thought it was important for the message that I was getting across to Piers that we sit face to face and we have a conversation as human beings about the situation in Gaza. Because, for a lot of people, it's just like a political talking point, Gaza. People will deny starvation is going on in Gaza. People will deny that, children are targeted, and they're just talking points. But when you're on the ground in Gaza and you're holding lifeless children, you're holding kids with heads missing, and you're taking plastic bags off mothers, and inside them are melted children, it doesn't become a talking point to somebody like me. And that's why I felt like, it's important when we do these shows as doctors, it's important that we bring the human element to this, that there is a real human cost to what's going on in Gaza. People are not just being killed, they're being killed in the most grotesque, inhumane ways at a large mass scale. This is, I've been with doctors in Gaza who have been to Mosul when there was the ISIS fighting, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And all of them have said the same thing. They've never seen anything like Gaza. And nothing can prepare you when you go into Gaza. I mean, I was there for some of the worst mass casualty events of the war. I was there last year when they rescued the 4 Israeli hostages, and they killed and injured like 1,400 people in 2 hours. I was there the night the ceasefire broke, where they killed 200 children in an hour. Now, remember, these are just reported. There are many hundreds that are under the rubble that don't get reported. Mm-hmm. So how many were killed is just unbelievable. But, when you come in and the entire ER room floor is just filled with children's bodies, children with limbs missing who are crying with their intestines hanging out, and you don't even have painkillers. We don't even have painkillers in the hospital, and you're just watching a child with his intestines hanging out, taking his last breath. I mean, this is really what's going on in Gaza, and it's hard for me to debate with somebody whether this is even real or not. Like, these are human beings. They deserve a level of dignity, and they deserve for us to talk about this without it being used as a political pawn. And, that was part of the reason why when I came out of Gaza, I felt like we had to do something about this. We can't have children dying on the streets, on the floor in Gaza because the hospitals are overcrowded, while the hospitals are being bombed while we're treating these kids. Something needs to change. And, the GHF, bringing food into Gaza while shooting at women and children, starving women and children. Like, we can't have that either. What we need is a solution. And the solution is these states that are responsible for arming and funding this genocide need to be responsible for saving these children's lives. And that's what the campaign has been about. It's been about going to these governments, getting them to talk to us, getting them to sign on to and committing to bringing this hospital in to Gaza.
How many countries have you been to since leaving Gaza to try to lobby for this effort now?
Man, I've traveled all over. Look, I've been to Ireland. I've been to the UK, obviously Australia. I'm here in America. We're heading to Canada soon. I've been to Italy to help with the flotilla, to try and break the naval blockade, because, you know, what they're trying to do is they're trying to open a humanitarian corridor. You know, if that opens a humanitarian corridor, we get in medical supplies through the sea. I've just been doing whatever I can. Even Egypt, I went to Egypt for the March of Return when they tried to march to break the siege at Rafah crossing. I've been everywhere supporting every single cause to try and break this siege, because this isn't just about the overall siege on Gaza. There is a journalistic siege on Gaza where journalists aren't allowed in. There's a food siege on Gaza where food isn't allowed in. There's a medical blockade on Gaza. There is a science blockade on Gaza. You know, all of these things, one of them has to go. There's an air blockade, there's a naval blockade, there's a land blockade. One of these dominoes has to fall. And me as a doctor, what I can try and do is I can try and break the medical blockade on Gaza, because if we break that, that is our way in, and hopefully that will act as a domino effect and we'll break all these other blockades that are going on in Gaza.
Can you speak a little bit about the impact of the medical blockade? I know you mentioned, of course, that there is no pain medication, but what are some of the other medical tools and necessities that have been blocked in the blockade?
Do you know, there's no functioning MRI machine in the whole of Gaza. There's not a single functioning MRI machine. So there's 2 million people, well, whatever is left of Gaza.
Right.
And there's no functioning MRI machine. In the north of Gaza, where I was working at the Baptist Hospital, we had one CT scanner. Now, when you have a mass casualty event and you have, you know, 100, 200 people being brought in and they all need a CT scanner, we literally had people dying, waiting for a CT scan. When we went down south to Al-Aqsa Hospital, the CT scanner that they had there doesn't work. So what we would have to do is we would intubate patients in the ER and the resuscitation. You know, these would be people that we would be putting in chest drains. We would be cutting open their chest to try and restart their heart from
without pain medication.
Well, you know, I mean, look, there is some form of pain medication there. You know, there's ketamine, but like, when you've got a mass casualty event and you've got hundreds of people in there, right, and you've got people who are unstable, you can't wait for a nurse to go get you the ketamine, right? So what would happen is I would have to get my scalpel and I would just have to cut through the child's chest, you know, to get a chest drain in, because it's not that we didn't have, and look, we're limited with supplies of anesthetics and painkillers that we have, but there's not even the staff levels involved that we can actually, you know, get the painkillers involved, you know, bought in time to do these procedures safely. And, you know, when we do these procedures, there's a lot of risk of giving ketamine, because ketamine can cause things like a laryngeal spasm for kids, which can, you know, block their airway. You know, we don't even have SATs monitoring. We can't even monitor children. You know, they're on the floor. I can't monitor their breathing on the floor. And therefore, if you give them something, it might cause a respiratory distress in a child. You might actually kill them from the drug that you give them, because we can't monitor them properly. So, you know, there's a cost benefit analysis. If I'm giving a child ketamine and they're outside on the outside the ER because it's overflown, if anything happens to that child's airway, will I have enough medical equipment and will I have enough doctors and nurses around me to help secure this child's airway? The answer is no. So, you know, sometimes we make a decision not to give a child painkillers because we don't have, you know, the necessary doctors and nurses to monitor them.
Yeah.
So, you know, look, the situation is beyond catastrophic in Gaza. There are so many people in Gaza as well who have cancer, and there's no chemotherapy drugs getting into Gaza. While I was there, they bombed the Turkish cancer hospital and destroyed that, and that was a new building before the start of the war. That's completely gone. So you've got, you know, children with cancer who have no form of treatment and are slowly dying from cancer in Gaza, as well as being starved to death, as well as being bombed to death. I mean, you know, when you look at this and the level of cruelty, when you have drones coming down and in Arabic saying, "You're alone here. The Arabs have left you. They give us weapons and money, and they give you sheaths, to cover yourselves in, cloths for your burial." There's a psychological warfare there when these quadcopters come down and make noises of crying children, so people can come out of their tents and house to see where there is potentially a child that is in distress, and actually it's to lure them out to shoot them.
Yes, I remember those reports.
Yeah.
So you can confirm that too from your experience,
Yes.
that these
Yes.
Israeli drones are
Yeah.
are regularly playing audio as a way to either trick folks or lure them to kill them or harm them psychologically.
Well, they leave tins what look like tins of food out, and they're explosive. So kids, because they're so hungry, they find this tin and they think it's a tin of food, and when they open it, it explodes and it blows off their hands.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been this level of cruelty in my lifetime. I'm a young guy, but many people that I've talked to within the UN and within these aid organizations have never seen the deliberate targeting of children on this mass scale before.
Right.
I've dealt with, I was there, before the ceasefire broke. We were seeing kids coming in that had been shot in the head by snipers, targeted, and these would be children that would be the youngest child in a family. So they would be in the at home. A quadcopter would come in to the window and it would just shoot the youngest child and leave. It wouldn't kill the rest of the family. It would just kill the youngest child. We've seen this. We've seen the leaked videos from the GHF where they're laughing as they shoot people. We've seen before when it was the March of Return, when soldiers are putting up videos of them shooting children in the genitalia and laughing and high-fiving when they do it. This hasn't been just the start in Gaza. This is what they're doing to human beings. And the idea of getting this hospital into Gaza is they've destroyed and bombed pretty much every single hospital in Gaza. And I need the world to join forces. You can't just condemn what's going on and leave these people to die. These children are the largest cohort of child amputees in the world. These children are the largest per capita of orphans. These children are malnutritioned. To a stage 5 malnutrition means that their DNA changes.
Can you speak more about that? Because that is how, when we talk about generational trauma.
Yeah.
This is what happened to victims of the Holocaust, where you have a level of starvation that changes you and your descendants for the rest of time. There are thousands and thousands of Palestinians already in that irreversible stage, it appears.
So, right now, the reports are that 25% of Gaza is in stage 5 famine. Stage 5 famine means that 2 out of every 10,000 adults die a day, and 4 out of every 10,000 children die a day from starvation. Half the population is in stage 4, which means 2 out of every 10,000 children a day die, and 1 out of every 10,000 adults a day die from starvation. These are scary numbers. This also means that even if we were to bring food into Gaza, it wouldn't fix the problem.
Right.
And people actually might die from bringing food in, because what happens is you get things like refeeding syndrome, where their electrolytes and their salt levels are so low in their body that if I was to introduce food, it could overwhelm the body and cause things like an arrhythmia or heart attacks. Hence why it's not just enough for governments to say we need to let aid in. There needs to be a coordinated humanitarian response. And that's what I've been on the road campaigning for. I have been trying to get governments to say, look, it's not just good enough just to say we need to get more food in. We need to get an entire fleet of doctors and nurses with medical equipment and medical facilities into Gaza. These people have got some of the worst burns, some of the worst advanced stage cancers, some of the worst malnutrition, and all of this needs medical expertise and help. And we're not going to do it by just opening up a border and letting in a few trucks of aid. Healthcare workers have been targeted. Over 1,500 healthcare workers in Gaza have been killed. They don't have the capacity to deal with what's going on. They need us. The people of Gaza need us as humanitarian workers, as healthcare workers. They need us to come in abundance to help, and we need to come in with medical equipment. Right now, at the borders, the IDF, they take away from you baby formula, they take away from you your pocket ultrasound. They were arguing with us about even bringing in our stethoscopes into Gaza. This is deliberate systemic destruction of the healthcare system, and I think, people again, like, people debate this like it's a political talking points, but this is real life. This is a real systematic destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza, and it's the extinction of life in Gaza. And the only way that you fight back against the genocide is by bringing life. And the way that you bring life is a hospital, and that's what I've been trying to do.
And Israel has destroyed all of the farmland. It's basically they're unable to produce their own food, and that is why starvation is as acute as you say, because they are entirely reliant on aid coming in, which Israel is blocking in the siege. You mentioned some of the medical professionals that have been targeted. What is your sense of their awareness and some of your colleagues of their understanding of Israel's willingness to kill them and target hospitals?
Well, the actual hospital ground staff in Gaza.
Yeah.
Do you know, look, in Gaza, people there accept death as part of life. When I would be there, they would always say to me, no, look, you're our guest. It's okay if we die, but we don't want you to be killed. So like, you stay here. You don't go out and do this. We'll transfer the patients, not you. Death has become so common in Gaza that, like, when I was speaking to the paramedics, these were the paramedics that went and retrieved the bodies of the killed paramedics in Gaza, because I was there when they killed them, and I was there when they retrieved the bodies.
The ones where they zip tied them and tried to
buried them alive.
And buried them alive, yeah.
And I said to the paramedic, I went, are you not scared, like, of what would happen to you? And he was smiling. And, we stopped off and he bought me a coffee, and I had a Mars bar, and I gave him like a Mars bar, and he got me a coffee. And I said to him, you're not scared that this will be you next? And he said to me, we're already dead. We're already dead. And that's how he embraced it. He just embraced that, like, it wasn't a matter of if he was going to die, it was just when. But they'd already embraced the fact that death is there. And that's the majority of how Gazans feel. They feel like death is an inevitable for them, and it's just a matter of when. And that to me speaks to the mental health of the people of Palestine and the people of Gaza. A lot of people, like, we dehumanize them, on the right side, where they dehumanize them and they say they're all Hamas, they're all just human shields, and flatten Gaza. That's the dehumanization. But on the left, a lot of people dehumanize people in Gaza, and they go, oh, they're so resilient, they will withstand anything.
Romanticizing it.
They romanticize their resilience, and these are human beings, and I've seen them break down and cry. I've seen women hold their lifeless children's bodies and fall to the floor. I've seen fathers be inconsolable. These are real things, and these aren't They aren't superhuman. They're just human like me and you. Yes, they have an increased level of resistance compared to the average person, but they need help. They don't need us to romanticize them. They don't need us to belittle them either on the right side. What they need is they need help, and they need us to come together and work out that, like, look, within this movement, like, it doesn't matter if people agree with my talking points or what I think of the political situation on which countries or this, that, and the other. What we need is we need people to work together to help relieve this situation in Gaza, because it is catastrophic.
You spoke a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate on the lack of understanding about the true death toll. I talk about this all the time on the show. I'm sure some people in the audience are sick of it, but I just feel like we need to emphasize it every time, because the Western press is completely complicit in the genocide in many ways, but the one that's most egregious to this day, in my view, is the repeating of the wildly undercounted death toll in Gaza. Can you speak about what that looks like on the ground, and why there is such a discrepancy?
If I've got a dead child, right, why would I risk walking, because there's no fuel for the cars, and I don't have money to pay for a donkey cart? Why would I pay to take the child to the hospital, to have a doctor to say, yep, the child is dead, for then me to take the child back to bury it? Makes no sense. It's dangerous. I've got other children that I need to look after. So what families do is they just bury them there and then outside on the street. What also happens is when we have paramedics coming when there's a home that's been bombed, because right now, because all these homes have been destroyed, there's like maybe 100 people living in a house that would have housed maybe 10 people. And when that house gets bombed, 100 people are underneath the rubble. The paramedics will only bring in like 15 bodies, 30 bodies. There's still 70 underneath the rubble, and they don't get counted. And, you know, when a week, 2 weeks go past, you know everybody underneath that rubble is dead. There's no one surviving after that. So, you know, when we talk about 90% of the homes in Gaza are destroyed, how many tens of thousands are underneath the rubble? How many were killed when they were besieged by the military and families just buried their loved ones in the garden, buried their loved ones on the streets? You know, how many mass graves have we seen and found and been discovered? You know, there's a lot of red zones in Gaza. 80% of Gaza is red zones. How many mass graves are there in those red zones? I think what you'll find is when hopefully, and I'm hoping, you know, Gaza isn't ethnically cleansed, and I'm hoping when they rebuild Gaza, and if it's, you know, the Palestinians or whoever rebuilds Gaza, the uncovering of the mass graves, there will be so many mass graves that will be uncovered. And I think that's going to be one of the big things that's going to hit people, is when they are rebuilding and they're putting in the groundwork and the cement and they find all of these mass graves. There'll be a lot of them in Gaza. And, you know, look, there's a lot of people also missing that have been taken by the IDF.
Yeah.
And we don't know where they are. We don't know how many of them have been killed inside these torture dungeons that they're taken into. I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but it's, you know.
Oh my gosh.
It's,
I mean, we have to speak exactly about what's happening there, and you had this firsthand look to this horror that I see through my phone, and it is immensely distressing, of course, and heartbreaking. And the images and videos that get me the most, even, you know, you can see what you're describing: shredded children, headless children. But it's the wailing of the parents that is the hardest, I guess, for me to watch. And then I just can't even imagine seeing that in person.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, like, what is it like to even, it must be so disorienting to even be in the West, like seeing people just going about their daily lives after what you've just experienced.
Do you know, for me, I think what's difficult for someone like me is you know, I'm you know, my father was born in Gaza. I'm Palestinian originally, my background, and you know, I'm Gazan. When you get those children that come in and you see this child and it looks like you when you were a kid, you know, when I was there, if I wasn't wearing my my NGO jacket, everyone thought I was just a Palestinian, a well-fed Palestinian, but, you know, everyone just thought I was from Gaza, because I've got family in Gaza. I've got aunties, uncles, cousins and stuff like that in Gaza. And, you know, you see these people that look exactly like you. You see these children that have the same nose as you, the same ears, the same eyes. And that's the thing that really hits you. And there were some times when we had these like mass casualty events and I would go be seeing children on the ward. Some of these kids had my last name, were related to me. And that was, I think, what gave me like kind of a unique experience to this, is like when you'd hear the wailing, it would be the wailing of a family member, you know, to this. That is the bit that hits me. And then when you go back and, you know, you've seen now in the UK and in Australia, these massive anti-immigration marches. And, you know, especially in the UK, it's always weird to me because they're always about, oh, we need to send them home. And I'm sat there and I'm going, but you gave my home away.
Yeah.
You were the ones that gave my home away. You want me to go home. You don't want me to be here. But at the same time, you're supplying the weapons that destroys my home, so I can't go back home. You are supporting the ethnic cleansing of my people and my home. Where are we going to go as 2 million Gazans? Where are they going to go? And then when they do come to Europe after you've supported their ethnic cleansing, you're going to complain about them coming over there after you've supported their displacement? To me, like, you know, like the hypocrisy and the levels of the hypocrisy of the West and the levels in which the trauma has been inflicted in the Middle East, where they have redrawn the maps in North Africa, where they were the ones that put in these families in charge of these monarchs in charge of these countries, where, you know, they did the Balfour Declaration, where they've supplied the weapons to, you know, whether it was the French that supplied, you know, Bashar's family, the Assad family, you know, in Syria, and that caused what, the civil war that only just ended, and not even ended, but only just ended, you know, a few months ago, or when they, you know, armed the Zionist militias in the 1940s in Palestine that ended up doing the Nakba and ethnically cleansing 750,000 Palestinians. And then you have the audacity for these people to march and talk about how we're the ones that are changing Muslims or Arabs or these people from third world countries, we're the ones that are changing the demographic, and we're the ones that are, we're the ones that are causing this dispurity in the culture and changing the culture within these countries. And, most of us were like, look, if we could go home, we would. But, you steal our land, you take away all the resources, you make it an unlivable place for us. And then when we come over here, you tell us to go back home, or you tell us that we're not welcome. It's
that you're
hard.
Anti-Semites.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
and
that.
we're Semitic. We're Semitic.
Exactly.
We're Semitic. And it's, look, from all of those angles, it is tough. But I think one thing that I have to try and be is, I have to try and look into the humanity of people that say this. And I have to understand that it's coming from a place of ignorance, first and foremost, rather than it being something where they are bad or evil people. It comes from not understanding who we are. It comes from not understanding your own history. The reason why there's so many Pakistanis and Indians in the UK is because you brought them over after the Second World War to fill up the factories, to work, to rebuild your economy. After hundreds of thousands of them died defending the British and fighting off the Nazis, they don't understand that level of history. So they look at them and they think that they're that, these Southeast Asians are invaders. They look at these Muslims and they talk about how, these people are coming over here and bringing their religion and this, that, and the other. After you impose, monarchs that restrict them from practicing their religion in their own countries, while you supply weapons and you go on illegal wars and kill 1 million of them in Iraq, while supplying the weapons and political cover for a genocide in Gaza, when you bomb Yemen, when you impose sanctions on Syria and destroy how many hundreds of thousands of people's lives, when you back the Al-Qaeda in Syria and then bomb them in
Let alone, we didn't even touch what we've done to Latin America, which is very
that's
much,
the other one,
yeah.
And we sit here and it's just like, it's got to a stage where, especially now with social media and information being very present, people now are beginning to actually realize and learn the history of what's going on. And they're watching Gaza and they're saying that, like, you have politicians coming on TV and saying there is no genocide going on here, and people are watching the same images coming out on screen and going, how are you saying that kids aren't being killed, that kids aren't being targeted, when we're seeing it with our own eyes? And that's made people really take a step back and actually question everything that they've learned of our democratic liberal values. Like, are we democratic even here in the United States? When was the last time we got to pick a Democratic nominee?
Yeah.
When was the last time we picked a Democratic nominee here?
I mean, the party apparatus treats democracy as a nuisance to having
Yes.
democratic input. We saw this in the 2024 race, given the
Yes.
fact that a majority of the base of the Democratic Party wants to block weapons to Israel, and it's
Yeah.
not particularly close. And then independents also have very strong numbers in this. I mean, I guess, to kind of zoom out slightly, just on you're talking about the West and our relationship with the Middle East. I mean, Islamophobia is the defining bigotry of the 21st century for Western governments, because it crosses nations in the West. It has had probably the greatest impact on everybody's civil liberties. It has resulted in millions of deaths, and it will be hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million, depending on how long this goes, with Israel's attempt at the final solution in Gaza. Like, as you see, though, some public opinion begin to change, are there any glimmers of hope? Because there's no way we can escape that the Western imperialism, it has to cease for this to end. The Western governments have to act. When we're talking about public opinion in these Western countries, is there anything that has shown you that, okay, maybe there's a awakening happening, even though it's too slow?
I think I can speak, within the Muslim community. I think the Muslim community also need to understand that our freedoms and our liberty is going to be interconnected with many that are marginalized within the communities. And that is things like the LGBT community. That's things like women's rights as well. These are all things, as well as, like, I feel like as a Muslim community, we're going to have a real conversation about how we go around and support everybody because the attack, now you're seeing attacks with, Trump on neurodivergent people and autism, the attacks on Muslims is all too common. I think what we have to understand is that as times move on, there is more and more of a nationalistic approach in all these different countries, and it's Christian nationalism is a big part of it. And the big boogeyman for Christian nationalism is Islam. There's the historical links of the Crusades, but also as well, it's because Islam as a religion is a very disciplined religion, right? So you can come to a country and you can be a well-adjusted Muslim and live and work as a doctor, as a lawyer, but you still pray your 5 prayers a day. You still fast. And that puts a spotlight on you. And people say that's different. And unfortunately, that's not going to change. Muslims are not going to change. And I think it's the fact that people don't understand. They think that Islam is attacking Christianity when it's not. What's attacking Christianity and what's destroying, things like families is the fact that it's so expensive now to have a family.
Yeah.
The capitalism has destroyed our society. Here, especially in the US, like how many people get maternity leave? How many women can just stay off work to build a family? They can't. So the attack on the family is a financial attack on family. It's not because of Islam. It's also the cultural difference as well. Muslims, they'll tend to live with their parents in their parents' homes, right? They don't go out and buy separate cars for each other and have different mortgages. So therefore they're able to save. Therefore they're able to have families. Therefore they're able to have more kids. And what happens is the narrative shifts around that they're trying to outbreed us and this, that, and the other. But actually, the difference is between like Islam and these things. It's like there's this cultural paradigm shift where Islam is resilient to the effects of capitalism and the Western egocentric. It's about me and what I want, whereas their culture and their way is more about the community and family orientation. And people see the attacks on the family unit in the West, and they see the declining birth rates. And because of the declining birth rates, we need to get immigrants to come in. And the places where there's a lot of immigrants is in the third world, and a lot of them are Muslim countries. So these Muslims are coming in on, in these mass migrations to these countries, not because of, the governments want to bring them in, but the governments need to bring them in to keep this capitalistic system alive. Which is, we've got an aging population, you've got a lot of women and people choosing not to have kids. And if they do have kids, they have them later in life, so they have less kids. And therefore, we're not replacing and we're not improving the population rates. And because of that, we are having to bring in immigrants. And that's what people are then associating with, or the billionaires or the elite are going, that's the problem. These immigrants coming over here and they're replacing you and this, that, and the other. When actually, the thing that's replacing us is the fact that you can't afford to live. You can't afford to have a family. You wouldn't be bringing in all of these migrants and all of these people to come if you actually had a decent standard set of living. And it's not Islam that is the problem to this. The problem is the environment that you're in is not allowing you to have a family. It's not allowing you to live a comfortable life. And Islam is the scapegoat, unfortunately.
Yep. Lastly, can you speak about this effort to build the Children's Hospital and what our audience can do to help in that effort?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll leave you the donation page. We've started a donation page here.
We'll put a link down below wherever people are listening, watching.
Yeah, so look, we're partnering up with things like World Central Kitchen. They're going to help us. We've already got a maternity and neonatal hospital built. This hospital, which will be similar to what the pediatric hospital is, it is a solar panel powered mobile units that get put on the back of trucks and brought into Gaza and then assembled like a jigsaw puzzle. They're built in Jordan. They have state-of-the-art medical equipment. They have operating theaters, intensive care units, pathology labs, pharmacies, doctors' quarters. They have kitchens. It has its own capacity to refill oxygen cylinders as well. And all of this, like I say, is self-sufficient, solar panel powered. So this is bringing infrastructure that's built outside of Gaza and bringing it into Gaza. And, we already have a maternity and neonatal hospital at the border in Jordan ready to go in. I've been trying to lobby the British government and the Australian government to work with the Jordanians to get this hospital in. And if we can get this hospital in, that'll be the first one in. And then after that, we're going to start building the pediatric hospital. And that's what we're fundraising for. And if we do this, we want to build a 100-bed pediatric hospital that will one, act as a standalone hospital, but also it will work alongside with the pediatric hospitals in Gaza to help support them, because the other issue is the lack of evacuations. We can't even evacuate kids out of Gaza, so they're dying waiting to leave for treatment. Whereas if we can bring this state-of-the-art hospital in with doctors and nurses from the West with all their medical equipment and all their medical expertise, hopefully we can treat these kids in Gaza while the blockade is on, so we can save their lives.
Well, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, thank you so much for your time today. We will put a link to that donation where you can give it to us right when we go to break, and we'll put it down below. Thanks so much for coming on.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. A quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Jennifer Welch. We are back, and we are joined now by Jennifer Welch, interior designer, co-host of the I've Had It podcast, and co-author of Life is a Lazy Susan of Shit Sandwiches. Jennifer, we've been meaning to have you on for a while. So thrilled we were able to make this happen.
Thank you so much for having me on. I am doing a midlife gap year soon, and I'm moving to New York out of the Bible Belt. And I've raised my kids. The youngest one is at USC. And you and I were texting about my coming on. And I was like, this is perfect because I need friends in New York. So this is our first time meeting, and I'm going to be your new best friend.
I know. Well, I mean, I'm all for it. And we have to have you on in studio once you officially move in. But I couldn't wait till you got here in October to have you on, especially because I knew Sam would be out today and I wanted a little bit of girl time. I hope that's all right with you.
Love it.
But we can bring you on with him as well, because he seemed a little jealous, honestly, when I told him you would be on today.
I love that. It's always when you're 50 and somebody's jealous they don't get to be with you, you just absorb that energy.
Can you honestly just tell us a little bit about your background? I had meant to ask you about this because I've been seeing, people will say you've got the liberal wine mom thing locked down, and I'm 31. I love wine. I hope to be a mom at one day. So mom one day. Wouldn't take that as something that's like offensive. I think it's actually pretty awesome. So I hope to be a future wine mom. Or do you find that to be a funny way to describe your demographic?
There's two takes on that. The first one is sometimes people refer to us as mom podcasters in a reductive way, and you would never hear anybody refer to Joe Rogan as a dad podcaster.
Right.
And so in that regard, fuck them. In the regard that members of the LGBTQ plus or of the Black and brown community are refreshed to see a woman like me who meets the optics that you might think, oh, fuck, where was she on January 6th? And then you hear me advocating for you. And then my kids told me the phrase mother, like you're so mother. So in that regard, being like a maternal supporter or ally or an aunt or a big sister, I embrace that entirely.
And what do you think about, I guess, some of the reaction in the Democratic base to the way that leadership has responded here? I know you've been really vocally critical of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, as we have been on this show, but it's almost like they were surprised that your show would have this take, but it's actually reflective of what we're seeing in the base. Like, a majority of Democrats do not want this leadership anymore. And I don't understand why either of our opinions on this would be controversial.
Well, I think that Democratic establishment has a brand of pick-me politics. They want everybody to like them. And when you aspire for everybody to like you, nobody likes you because you're inauthentic and you don't stand for anything. And so right now, what everybody wants to see is people that stand up and fight, that fight against this fascist regime. And when you see the word salad and the moral duplicity coming out of Jeffries, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer, it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking because this is a moment where you have to set all of your PAC money aside and you have to get on your big boy pants and stand up and not be a pussy. And when I see these Democratic establishment candidates puss out, it angers me, but more than anything, it's heartbreaking because their positions as a woman who lives deeply in a red state, we have had to rely on Democratic leaders from other states to protect us from MAGA and Republicans' worst impulses, which are putting the 10 Commandments in schools, no exceptions to abortions, very horrible education systems, Trump Bibles in schools, et cetera. I could go on. And so you rely on these certain politicians to be uncompromising when it comes to human rights. So when you see them compromise, I mean, it really enrages me / makes me sad at the same time.
What do you think of the "you get what you voted for" thing? Because when I think about red states, I think about some of the poorest states in the South. I mean, you're from Mississippi, right?
No, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, I'm so sorry. But I think about
I'm not that
others.
redneck.
Not that, I apologize. I don't know where I got that from. But I mean, maybe I'm just thinking of Mississippi. Like
Look,
these
my
are
husband's my third cousin, not my first cousin. Emma, okay.
I got it. I'm sorry to let my coastal elitism slip out and blend all these states together. But it is like there are vulnerable communities in those states. They just are gerrymandered out of politics, or they are in areas that are kind of so left behind that they're not considered as a part of kind of our active voting political community. And I don't want to leave those folks behind just because a bunch of, Christian white people in those states decide to vote for Trump.
Well, my response to this is twofold. On the surface, I totally get you get what you voted for, fuck around and find out, as an impulsive reaction when you see what this regime is doing. As a progressive person, once I get past that impulse of being catty and petty, which is fun to be for a few seconds, cooler heads prevail. And then I realize, let's take, for example, first and foremost, the Latinos for Trump. That girl had that big salsa rally. I will vote for Donald Trump, and they're woohoo, arriba, arriba. And then her husband and her nephew, ICE, scrape him out the door. She's bawling, crying. She feels betrayed by Donald Trump. And because I'm progressive, I have empathy for her, even though she was a dipshit, even though she didn't watch the signs at the Republican National Convention that said mass deportations now, even though it enrages me that they were so stupid to think that they could align with people that were going to oppress your people, and at some point those knives wouldn't be turned on you. As a progressive person, I still have empathy for them. As it pertains to people in rural America, I have empathy for them because, like people in Oklahoma, the only thing they have in their rural communities is church. And these MAGA politicians, let's just take our Governor Kevin Stitt, who I refer to as Governor Dipshit. Governor Dipshit weaponizes Christianity out in rural Oklahoma, and he Christian signals and he Jesus signals, and he just throws out a few things to say, hey, I'm one of yours. And then he completely rapes and pillages every sense of autonomy or any sort of social safety net they could possibly have. We've gone from 16 years ago, we had a Democratic governor. We were 14th in education. MAGA supermajority policies, we are dead last in education. So I have empathy for those people because they've been lied to and manipulated. The people I have no fucking empathy for are country club white Republicans that played a short-term game. They know Trump's a nut. They know that he's surrounded by a bunch of nuts. And they played this short term, I want my 401k to be great. And I know he's a racist. I know he's a sexist. I know that, these women that are getting raped in certain states can't have access to health care, but I don't give a shit because I'm just a capitalist. When they lose all of their money, I'm not going to feel empathy for them. But the other two, I do feel empathy for.
I totally agree with you. And you mentioned some of the Christo-fascism of this administration. I want to play this clip from Charlie Kirk's memorial, which it was filled with pyrotechnics and speeches by Donald Trump and other political figures, where it seems like everybody's last conversation with Charlie Kirk validated all of their politics prior to this. But Benny Johnson, MAGA influencer, who I don't know if he was responsible for the grinder outage at the event. I mean, it could have been him. It could have been anybody, honestly, just due to overuse. Here he is speaking, and you can pick up on a lot of what Jennifer is saying here about like the Christo-fascist elements of this movement.
The Apostle Paul describes how God establishes the rulers of the nations. In the audience right now, there are rulers of our land. Represented right here is the State Department, the Department of War, the Department of Justice, the chief exec, our president, President Trump, from an assassin's bullet for this moment. And what does the Apostle Paul in Romans say about a godly leadership? He says that rulers wield the sword for the protection of good men and for the terror of evil men. May we pray that our rulers here.
Okay, I think we get the gist. I like how men are both the protagonists and antagonists. Women are just along for the ride. God saved the president, but wanted the
men on men action.
Right, wanted the firefighter to die at the rally, and then I guess also had to sacrifice Charlie Kirk for this moment is the implication from Benny Johnson.
He works in mysterious ways.
I mean, so this is what they do. This is what is Christian signaling, Jesus signaling, and this is what, as being an atheist Democrat in a red state my whole life, I see that these politicians do. And when you think about people in rural America, they don't fucking know what's going on in Gaza. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes. They don't care. That is the part of rural America is simply, you get up. My husband's from rural Oklahoma. He's a criminal defense attorney. And he said, you get up, you try to, grind your way through your day. Nobody's making any money. Everybody's broke. Half the people are on meth. And then you watch Wheel of Fortune. And then you say, who can I blame for my shitty life? Fox News serves up who you can blame, who you're going to scapegoat, those immigrants, those trans people, those drag queens, those lesbians. We had a guy who ran for Senate in Oklahoma, and he campaigned in rural Oklahoma that lesbians were a huge problem in eastern Oklahoma, which I would say there is kind of a fine line between cowgirls and lesbians. Sometimes you're kind of like, could go either way. But right. They Christian signal, and it works with them because their only form of culture or home or social life is in these churches, and the churches are hell, fire, damnation. You're no good. You need to be saved. And so for me, I was not surprised that Christians clung on to Trump because I've always been at the top of prayer list. Everybody's always been trying to save me my whole life. And they are very primed for this type of cruelty talk. When friends would take me to go get me saved, the preachers sound exactly like Donald Trump. They sound exactly like Benny Johnson. So it's familiar.
I know you've spoken about this a bit with your co-host Pumps about, her upbringing versus yours, her growing up in a more traditional Christian household in the United States. Like, how has your friendship kind of informed that, one? And two, if you could expand on the element about churches only being like the only form of community, because I think that's really important. It's why cities are so scary to, I think, conservatives, is because you interact with all different kinds of people and you're in such close proximity that you have more options to form community. Although I think capitalism largely limits it because we're so on a razor's edge about our next paycheck or whatever. But like that element, I think, is really important. And this is a very drawn out question, but when I used to go cover Trump rallies, I was going to one Trump rally a week in the lead up to 2020. And it felt like when I went to mega church with my aunt, it was the same vibe. And it is a form of community, a perverse one, but it's because there are no other ones.
Totally. So, I had a really unique upbringing. My parents atheists. I don't know why we were in the buckle of the Bible Belt, but we were. I was born in Dallas, then moved to Oklahoma City when I was in grade school. And my parents traveled all the time, but I grew up around all of these really religious people. And so when and I never fit in with them because I was never indoctrinated. You know how today the rapture is supposed to come on Christian Talk? They're talking about it.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if we got raptured just right here on air?
Love it. I mean,
two
Oklahoma
atheists
City would be so tolerable. I want it to happen. But I remember when I was in 8th grade, I was a Brink Bobcat cheerleader. Go Bobcats. And everybody that I went to middle school with was like, the rapture's coming, the rapture's coming, the rapture's coming. I tell my mom, she'd go, oh, for God's sakes, Jennifer, that's ridiculous. These Christians are so intellectually stupid. And, you know, the football game came and went, the rapture never came. But it's this cult-like thing, and there's all this pressure to be involved in it. I'm so grateful that I was never indoctrinated in it, because what we have right now is a bunch of people that are suffering the consequences of religious abuse. And my co-host, Pumps, she suffered the consequences of religious abuse. Now, her parents didn't set out to do this. The structures that they were raised in earnestly set her to be raised in the same structures. But if you're told when you're born that you're inherently bad, and I had a boyfriend in high school, Emma, whose dad was a Baptist preacher, and he got grounded for 3 months for beating off when he was 16 years old. Like, the shame of that is incredibly
what that does to you.
Abusive. And so then you see Grindr crashing, and you see all of these MAGA people that have all of this child SA stuff on their phones. And I think you have like a mass psychosis of people that are suffering from religious abuse. So when they have things like this, where they can all get together to feel normal, and then the propaganda administration they know exactly what they're doing by using religion in this way. And there's so many people, this is all they know. And I think this is what's so insidious about what Charlie Kirk did. He knew, and the people that funded him knew, that for all of these megachurch people in suburban rural America, they did exactly what their parents told them to do. They prayed at the flagpole. They did Bible study, circle jerks, etc. Circle jerk, pun intended. Pun intended there. Right. Yeah. And so then they go to college, and that's the first time they're free. They're liberated. They can maybe make their own script. And that's what's so dangerous and insidious about what Charlie Kirk did. They intentionally wanted him placed at a time where free thought could be uninterrupted. And he went there to interrupt it in Christian signal. And so, you know, the right always accuses us of virtue signaling, and probably we're guilty of that. And I don't think that's something we should necessarily apologize for. But weaponizing your faith against people who inherently have some questions, like, did Noah really load up all those animals and get on the boat? Like, I had friends that literally believe that. Pumps, my co-host, she told me one time she thought people lived to be 950 years old. And she'd been to law school. Imagine that, been to law school, but was indoctrinated not to critically think, not to ask questions. And that's what's so egregious and horrible about Turning Point's activities, is they're stunting the growth. And then you're going to have more broken, damaged people, because that's the perfect petri dish for MAGA to get all of their supporters.
It is interesting to me, too, how the relationship with Trump also almost mirrors, not to psychoanalyze them too much, but it's kind of fun, mirrors a relationship with almost like an abusive father, where it feels like love, where he's abusing them, and you just take it because there's no, it seems like, healthy emotional reaction or critical thought that could
Emma,
allow you.
I think it's bigger than that. I think it mirrors the relationship with the Old Testament God.
There you go. There you go. Well, I mean, he stands in as Jesus. And you heard Mike Pence. I don't know if you read that interview with him a few years ago, back when he was still vice president. He described how, you know, Trump is this imperfect vessel, but he feels like God is speaking through him, and serving him is like serving God. And I don't know how you get from point A to point B, except for the fact that Trump is like charismatic and omnipresent, charismatic in his own perverse way, and leading a coalition of religious fundamentalists.
Yeah, I mean, I was not surprised because when all of my friends were trying to save me when I was in junior high and high school, and I would lie to my mother and say, "Hey, I'm going to go spend the night with this person." She'd be like, "Don't go to that church." Of course, I immediately went to the church because I wanted to fit in with my friends, right? And so I remember this one church I went to in particular. It was called Crossroads Cathedral. And my friend Shonda and her mother drove me there, and they were working class people. My family was more upper class, upper middle class. And Shonda's mom worked at UPS, really sweet lady named Debbie. And we pull up to 7-Eleven, and she has a cup in her car full of coins with a $20 bill at the top. And she said, "You girls pump the gas and one of you go pay." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll go pay. Shonda, you pump the gas." So I grabbed the $20 bill and I'm going to take it into 7-Eleven. She wanted us to put $5 in. She goes, "No, Jennifer, that 20 is for the pastor. It's for the church. Count out the coins." And so I was like, well, that's fucked up. But I did as I was told. I counted out the coins. We pull up to Crossroads Cathedral in South Oklahoma City. And right at the same time, this white Rolls Royce pulls up. And this guy gets out, Pastor Schaefer is his name, and he has on a white suit and a white mink coat. His wife gets out, and she has total Tammy Faye vibes, Righteous Gemstone. The big eyelashes, a white mink coat. We go inside, and they start doing all this Bible thumping and talking in tongues and talking about demons and all this fucking crazy shit. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever been around. And here's Debbie, who had a black eye because her husband had roughed her up a few nights before, giving $20 to this grifter, this total lying sack of shit, Pastor Schaefer. And so when Trump started doing that, I thought, this is familiar to them. This type of abusive, lying, grifting relationship is familiar, and the cognitive dissonance that it takes to both love your pastor and overlook all of his moral, obvious shortcomings is very familiar to this base. So I think that my perspective, having been raised in the Death Star, I'm not shocked that Christians like him. I know people on the coast were shocked. I was not shocked one bit. He's mean. He traffics in cruelty. Every single church that I went to where my friends tried to get me saved, the same thing. It was the same kind of talking, rambling, whacked out shit that Trump does.
He is a glorified megachurch pastor, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that is fascinating. That really solves a lot of, I think, questions, that maybe people have about that relationship because of, all of the things that should be antithetical because of his complete, depravity individually. That all got washed away for that reason. Can we talk a little bit more about Kirk as well? Because I had forgotten, I guess, and this is, my privilege too, but I remembered all of his bigoted statements, towards Black people, towards Palestinians, towards basically anybody, trans people, gay people, what have you. But his anti-Blackness was so acute. And I think, back to what you were talking about earlier, about people being surprised that someone looks like you or even someone that looks like me is speaking honestly about what Kirk's legacy is and what the impact is of the right now. Like, where do you view your responsibility in that? Because our leadership isn't doing it. And the idea that we should just throw more marginalized groups under the bus to appease this fascist churn, it is going to gobble us all up. There has to be a firm line here. And I think that there were a lot of people that were genuinely hurt to see the whitewashing of the things that he said. I mean, Black Americans in this country in particular, I think, because it was so horrific. And then you have the Senate unanimously voting to make a Remembrance Day for him, and just a few dozen Democrats in the House standing up here. But among the base, this is a consensus opinion, basically.
Yeah. So as a white American, I think all of us should aspire to be cookout approved whites. And I think We need to align ourselves with the Black community the way you will your own. And until we have that type of rock solid allyship, you see people make excuses for the racism and that exists all the time. And as a white person who grew up in a white suburban world, I hear racism all the time. And you have to stand up and you have to defend your Black and brown brothers and sisters. The whitewashing of his legacy is so abhorrent and hurtful. It hurts me to see it, but it's also a reminder of all of the white racists that I've been around in my life. And I think that what the Democrats have done by voting to honor is just an absolute, total fucking disgrace. I think they should be ashamed of themselves. I think that I do not understand how somebody like Hakeem Jeffries, that is a Black man, can vote to honor a man who trafficked in racist cruelty and made Black people less safe and demeaned.
And who is this winning over? I mean, that's the
so
other thing.
Weird.
Yeah. Donors,
It's so weird. I just think that our responsibility is to call out what everybody sees with their own eyes and hears with their own ears, saying, you saw and you heard Charlie Kirk be a racist and you were correct. That's it.
Yeah.
You don't have to spin it. You don't have to revisionist history it. Let people know what you saw is correct. He was a man that profited off of racist. And then what you also saw is correct. Bizarrely, a Black man just voted to honor him. It's fucking crazy.
It's crazy. But it shows, I think, the rot right now at the core of the Democratic Party, unfortunately. I mean, the reality is that voters, they're there. The voters are ready. The voters are ready for a transformational candidate. They're ready for a change in leadership. And yet the party's responsiveness has been non-existent, it feels like, especially at the very top. You have a select few. You have AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Zohran Mamdani, who you had on your show, which I'd love for you to give your thoughts on too. And you have governors, like I think Pritzker's done a good job, and Van Hollen in the Senate, and of course Bernie Sanders. But part of what is happening here is that Trump is able to fill vacuums because vacuums are being left purposefully. And all they're trying to do is hang on by their fingernails until the midterms. But the impacts are still going to happen. I mean, the Chuck Schumer is just waiting for an excuse to cave on the government shutdown right now. And I don't understand how you can demonstrate, like, the party is so unpopular, and part of the problem is that people don't think they stand for anything, and so their answer is, let's not stand for anything harder.
I cannot understand it. I have been sitting here trying to understand it, and I think that they're basically beholden to the same corporations that got MAGA elected. And so you have a opposition party that is MAGA light. And I think obviously the AIPAC money plays a huge, huge role in this. And I can always use Cory Booker as a prime example for this. You know, we've had him on our podcast. I liked him. He was feisty. He spoke about, equality, and he spoke up for democracy, blah, blah, blah. Then he did the 25-hour barn burner. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to pee. I'm fighting for democracy.
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go, Cory. And then he's playing peekaboo photograph with Benjamin Netanyahu. And I'm like, say what? Are you kidding me? So now everything that Cory says, he's not a credible messenger to me. And people say that, oh, the left, you want everybody, you have this purity issue. That's not it. We have a credibility issue. We want you to be a credible messenger. You don't have to be pure. If Cory Booker or Hakeem Jeffries right now, because we're so desperate and beggars can't be choosers, if they said, we're fucked up about the AIPAC money.
I was wrong.
We're in the fight of our lives. Please get behind me. We can duke it out later. I would be first in line. Because MAGA moved Trump far to the right, we can move our leaders further to the left. And we can't just be dismissive of them. But if they continue to dismiss us, then I'm going to go after them. I'm going to walk and chew gum. I'm going to go after Trump, who I call Kanks. I'm going to go after Little Smokey, who, of course, is failed drag queen, Vice President J.D. Vance, Smokey Eye sociopath, which we refer to as Little Smokey. And you can imagine what I mean by that, but the smoky eye and a small
I like
penis.
the visual you're giving right now.
And a small penis. And
thanks for the podcast audience so they know.
we can go after all of these things, but we cannot give these complicit Democrats a pass. We have to go after them as well.
Right. And it's about making the opposition party stronger. That's what it's about. And I think most people are kind of on board with that. It's just that the party apparatus is completely sclerotic right now. Lastly, you mentioned some of your favorite nicknames. I've been using Kanks in conversations. I've gotten my mom to listen to your show too, so we'll call him Kanks on the phone with each other. So thanks for giving us something to laugh about.
Yeah.
Kanks, you got a Little Smokey. Who are your other favorite? What's some of your other favorite
Eric and Don
nicknames?
are Dumb and Dumber. Eric and Don Jr.
Yeah.
Of course, Eric being dumber and Don Jr. being dumb. So Dumb
Damn,
and Dumber.
Really? I would go the other way.
You really would? You think Eric's dumb and Don Jr.'s dumber?
I don't know. That's really tough. Matt's thinking really hard over there.
Usually you would say the blonde is dumber, but I think Eric is smarter than Don Jr.
I think Eric might be, but
Here's
I mean,
the thing about Eric.
Yeah.
You know that Lara Trump, you know that when she's sitting there at Fox News, Eric's balls are just right in her cleavage. I mean, you can almost just feel it. You know that she's just got them all twisted up.
Yeah. I mean, how else would they let a woman with the Trump last name run for higher office? She must just have to be that kind of woman.
Well, it's just amazing to me how easy these MAGA men either emasculate themselves or how easy they are to emasculate. I just don't think we talk enough about, J.D. Vance is a failed drag queen that changed his name 3 times as an adult. And in a normal world that wouldn't, whatever. But he is a failed drag queen, leader of a party that's anti-drag, banning books.
Yeah.
I just think, from time to time, I always just remind our audience, we need to remember that he tried to be a drag queen and he failed. And then we show the photographs of how terrible he was at doing drag.
Right. Yeah. The Matt just set off camera. Hitler trying to be an artist. Yeah.
Mike Johnson. I call him Moses Mike because he said on camera that, when he was becoming Speaker of the House, that God, he says this, he goes, God woke me up in the middle of the night and he's like, hey, buddy, I think you're going to be Moses. And I'm just like, the fact that we have the Speaker of the House who claims that God woke him up in the middle of the night, tapped him on the shoulder and told him he was going to be Moses and part the sea and be the Speaker of the House is fucking crazy. And we also have to talk about the fact that Mike Johnson lives with this evangelical preacher. They're roommates. The evangelical preacher was spotted by neighbors answering the door in his panties one time as Mike got home from work. All right. This evangelical preacher is connected to this guy in Nashville who is a multimillionaire car guy, big Christian guy, who's when his wife divorced him, accused him in the divorce filings of forcing her to watch gay porn. Mike Johnson also has all these pray the gay away conversion camps.
He has an app on his phone where he monitors, him and his son monitor each other to hold them accountable so they're not jacking off, which is normal.
Yeah, so they're not watching gay porn.
Right.
So Moses Mike is a good one. We call Ron DeSantis Kitten Heels, Governor Kitten Heels, because he always wears a little booster because he's so short.
Yes, he does. I forgot about that.
We call Mark Wayne Mullins, the senator from our state, when he questions people. We're ranked 50th in education. And he says, when was you fired? We call him Booster Box Mullins because he also stands on a booster box when he's at the podium. And they just the nicknames just kind of come to us.
Well, it's great because, go ahead, Matt.
Is there one for Ryan Walters, the superintendent that you guys got over there in Oklahoma? Because I really don't like that guy.
No, we hate him. Here's the thing, Matt. It's so awful to cover local politics. I don't watch it at all. So I only see Ryan Walters, and he's on the local news all the time when he comes on the national news. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But here's the thing about Ryan Walters. There is a local blogger named The Lost Ogle, and and he has these people that are called the Ogle Moles. Somebody sent him, and you can Google it and find the picture. Ryan Walters is sitting on a bench with this guy, and they're touching each other's inner thighs. It's totally gay. I mean, it's just as gay as it gets, right? Which comes as a surprise to no one that he's slapping, tickling when he's not buying Trump Bibles, right? And so,
or accidentally screening porn
for
for the people that he works with, which is another story, that accidentally screens retro nudie flick for school board members.
Accidentally.
Whoops! This was a glitch that just happened.
That's amazing. I mean, the fact that you're combating Trump has really fallen off in the nickname game, so you're filling a vacuum here for righteousness. We'll read some IMs because people want have many thoughts and much love for you, Jennifer, before we let you go. Biden My Time says, Jennifer is hilarious. Feels like the fun half came early today. North Dakota Llama says, we don't catch Eric Trump licking the coke off his teeth on camera like old Donnie Jr. So that's allegedly. It's what it looked like, gumming. Not that I would know. Britt, Jennifer's statement on megachurch familiarity reminds me of Twain's easier to abuse people than to convince them they've been abused. Or paraphrase a little bit there. Nick09, Kirk was the perfect nice young man for conservative moms to fawn over. I feel like that's true.
Nice young Klansman.
Yeah. Human phone book. If I were religious, I'd think Trump may be the Antichrist, but I also think the only people dumb enough to follow the Antichrist are the only people who believe in the concept of the Antichrist.
Can we talk about what's his face that's having a conference on the Antichrist? Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel. Well, JD Vance owes his speaking about Smokey Eye.
Peter Thiel queer-eyed him.
Yeah.
Remember how he was chubby and dorky and not attractive, and then he goes off to Peter Thiel gay camp, and he comes back queer-eyed, thin, yassified eyeliner. Peter Thiel totally queer-eyed, little Smokey.
Yeah, he's the scariest part of this is the idea that Peter Thiel, who brings up the Antichrist all the time, and it sounds as like he's describing himself, that he has, if Trump, ends up perishing of natural causes given his health situation, they have all of the mechanisms in place to have Peter Thiel just like completely seize power through his, little bitch boy, Smokey.
Little Smokey. Yeah. But I mean, I did a whole episode on the progression of JD Vance. Because remember when he was in the Hillbilly Elegy days, he wasn't that cute and chubby, and he didn't dress very well. Right. He goes off to Peter Thiel's boot camp, and he comes back queer-eyed and yassified, and we are one news cycle away from a smoky eye.
I hear you on that. I mean, people really, really appreciate your appearance here. I'll read some of these, more of these in the fun half, but I got to let you go. Jennifer Welch, everybody check out the I've Had It podcast. It's a great show, and we try to laugh about the news here too, but sometimes I need a podcast that makes me laugh independently of the show, and I always go to you guys over there. Say hi to Pumps for me, and thanks so much for coming on, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me on, you guys. Bye.
Of course. Bye. With that, we're going to wrap up the free part of the show. We kind of did a little bit of like a Friday-ish vibe here, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't paywall that interview.
I mean, how could we have gone short with either of our guests today?
I know. Phenomenal. Really happy about it. Thanks to Jennifer for coming on. With that, we're going to wrap up here and head into the fun half. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Devin O'Shea talking about Vineland, a book that there's a new movie coming out called One Battle After Another. That is based on a Thomas Pynchon novel called Vineland, and we go deep in. We use that as an excuse to do basically a literary hangover episode on the book Vineland, which is it's one of the more accessible Pynchon books to read. It's shorter. It's not like a giant brick that you could use as a doorstop. And it's written in 1990 about 1984. It at sort of the height of Reaganite repression and sort of bureaucratic purging, and it follows a bunch of different informants of people who sort of were turned by the COINTEL or whatever during the 60s and 70s. So a very interesting novel with a lot of relevant messages for today. So I'm kind of excited. I'm a little bit leery of the movie. I did like Paul Thomas Anderson's Inherent Vice adaptation of Pynchon. This one seems to be a lot looser. None of the character names are the same or anything like that. There's a lot more action in the movie than there is in the book, but still nonetheless excited to watch it. So that'll be tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern time.
I am seeing the movie on Saturday. I could not be more excited. I'm a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan, and I'm trying to stay away from reviews, but I have heard that the politics of it are very good, which if that's the source material of it.
I mean, Pynchon has the greatest politics of really any person to ever live.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, we'll get into that, why guys like me and Devin like Pynchon. Yeah, I'm very excited to see it. A little bit upset that, well, I won't get into Johnny Greenwood doing the...
Yes.
Johnny Greenwood doing the soundtrack.
Johnny Greenwood.
And DiCaprio's Israeli hotels, which he should be asked about in the promo for this.
He should.
Especially because Israel does play a role in the actual novel of Vineland, where it talks about the Uzi a lot and the Israeli penchant for it. So.
I'm worried that you're spoiling the movie, but...
I have no idea what the movie's even like. But I know what the book is like.
He should be asked about that. Oh, you said something else that I wanted to mention. Oh, shoot. I forget. No, we'll just head into the fun half then, I guess. We won't take calls today. I'm sorry. It's going to be a truncated fun half. Oh, what I wanted to say is Quentin Tarantino, you grow out of that phase and then you learn about Paul Thomas Anderson, and then you realize, like, oh, in terms of, like, great filmmakers of our time, there's really no comparison.
I liked, I think Django's a
politely disagree, but...
Oh, really?
Django's Tarantino, right? Like, I like that and Glorious Bastards, but I'll say I bought the Kill Bills on DVD back in the day and never really understood what the whole deal was about those.
I just find it fun. They have a friendship and a friendly rivalry, and I used to love Tarantino, and then I got more into Paul Thomas, and I felt like I was much more erudite, but Brian's has a respectful disagreement.
Oh, Jackie Brown's great too, but yeah.
They're neck and neck, in my opinion.
All right. Well,
one happens to live in Israel, and so it makes it way,
I
way
forgot
fucking
about
harder
that.
to deal with.
That vindicated. And it's not Paul Thomas Anderson. All right, guys. See you in the fun app.